Welcome to episode 145 of the Spybrary podcast. The James Bond Book Club is back. Welcome to our regular host of the sessions, Mr. David Craggs. How are you, David?
I'm very well, Shane. Thank you.
Marvelous. And you want to introduce our special guest today?
Yes, well, we have a fellow member of Booze, a certain Mr. Simon Conway, who's assembled with us. He also knows Mr. Fleming. Simon himself is an accomplished writer. His work will be held back to be published at some point in the future. But I've had a look at his work, and he's certainly a very accomplished writer. So we're lucky to have him with us today. And we're going to discuss the third episode from our fellow member, Ian Fleming. Moonraker. The book actually isn't out until next month. We have all received advanced reader copies, and we've had a look at them, I know. So we're going to give our view on it in advance. But by way of background, and before we get going, a couple of things have happened to fellow member Ian Fleming in the interim period since we last met. First off, he sold his screenplay, Casino Royale, to the Yanks for TV publication or TV broadcast for the princely sum of $1,000. So next time we see him, we'll have to hit him up for a loan on the strength of that. They made a rather bizarre production out of it, though. We were presented with a certain card sharp called Jimmy Bond. Felix Leiter became Clarence Leiter, and he actually became an Englishman. Mathis was written out of it altogether, and Vesper Lind became Valerie Mathis. So things have been happening. Anyway, the Bond franchise seems to go from strength to strength. And as I say, we now have number 3 on the horizon. Something that I also discovered about number 3, evidently friend Fleming started this one off as a screenplay. He then decided to turn it into a full novel, and he bolted a certain card game onto it to make that full novel. And that's the book that we've all been reading, and that's the one we're going to discuss. So without further ado, what did we think, chaps? And what did you think, Simon?
I thought it was very interesting. I think, having read the first 2 Bond novels, I think we see a book that's it's a bit more experimental. All the action happens in a week. It's divided. There's the first time he's divided a novel up into parts. You get these 3 different parts. You get the Monday, then the Tuesday, Wednesday, then the Thursday, Friday. And then, of course, there's this. I mean, as a writer, I can tell you it's extraordinary. He wrote it in 6 weeks. 6 weeks to 2 months, which, as far as I can tell, and you may be able to correct me on that, Michael. But he's producing very fast, and I think that creates a kind of spontaneity in the work, which I think is that's powerfully expressed. So I think those things struck me about it. I think we're also beginning. I get a sense that we're beginning to see some of the features, and I'm assuming that we're going to see more of these novels. And given the sales, which seem to be pretty good, and seem to be increasing with each novel, and I expect this one will do well, then I think we're beginning to see features that we will see repeated in the future. We're getting to know M, for instance.
That's right.
Who sits behind a green baize door and doesn't like haphazard talk.
Yeah.
He has what Fleming describes as the Puritan and the Jesuit who lives in all leaders of men.
Yes.
Which I thought was quite a good. As a former military man, I can tell you that most generals I've met have got a bit of the Puritan and the Jesuit in them. And he's also, interestingly, in the club, Lord Basildon refers to him as Miles, and I wondered,
Yes.
wondered what you made of that, because I'd assumed that M was an acronym.
Well, the whole thing actually is very interesting because first off, I thought that we got a real insight into Bond's London life when we started out, and I found that very interesting. I mean, we can virtually detect from his movements that he lives in Soho. No, pardon me, lives in Chelsea. Rather, and you can detect that from his drive from Chelsea down to King's Road to Regent's Park. We learn a lot more about the building in Regent's Park. We learn that it's shared with various other parties. There's a woman that sits at the front who's an ex-retired employee whose job it is to send interested parties away. Universal Export is one, and I found all of this background very, very interesting. And I also, as you were saying, Simon, the way that M is fleshed out is really good. And we meet some other characters as well. I mean, we get to meet the chief of staff, which is
they like to have lunch together.
Yeah, Bill Tanner. And I, even with little things, actually, I loved the way that it opened up in the shooting range. And it seems like they've got some amazing gadgetry where they've got this target that shoots back. And Bond goes and loses 7 and 6 to the shooting instructor because of he misses the target, or rather he gets killed by the camera. And all of these things that are quite far-fetched, pardon me, Fleming seems to be in the business of making them very realistic. And I think that having it set in London, starting off in the headquarters, is really, really interesting. And
it all happens in the UK. I mean, that's the other point. Is it's not only is it a week, it's entirely in the UK, which isn't what you'd have expected after living there.
It isn't. And I actually had mixed feelings about that, because I was a little disappointed because I thought he was going to take us somewhere exotic. I mean, we've been down to sort of Deauville or Royal Azores, he called it. We've been to Jamaica, we've been to New York, we've been to Florida. And I was looking forward to this sort of extraordinary international travel. And no, not a bit of it. We're in the UK. But once I sort of got over the shock that I wasn't going to have a holiday abroad with him this time, I really started to like it. I liked it a lot.
There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack there, David. And it's amazing for such a short book that it has so much in it. It's a quick read. I wanted us to look a little bit at the character of M, because I think you're right. It's the first time we really got a look at him. And there were a few things. For instance, he said, I hope that, talking about Bond's sunburn, because he's been convalescing with solitaire after his last adventure. And he said, hope the color won't last long. Always suspicious of sunburned men in England.
Right. And that, there's something interesting there. And one of the most interesting descriptions of Bond, I think, that we've read, and it talks about Bond as an outsider. Bond knew that there was something alien and un-English about himself. He knew that he was a difficult man to cover up, particularly in England. He shrugged his shoulders. Abroad was what mattered. I mean, I imagine that many of our readers will imagine, they think that he's the image of Britishness around the world, but actually, he's not, or he's not in this book. And of course, that's familiar. I mean, the outsider protagonist is familiar to us from Dickens and Conrad, etc. But interesting that Fleming's written him that way.
Yes, I picked up on that, and I thought that was fascinating. He's really painting him as an outsider, as an international man of mystery, really.
And then we get we get this description of him, basically he likes cars and lunches and gambling and making love with rather cold passion to one of 3 similarly disposed married women.
Nothing wrong with all of that, by the way.
Well, it's a reflection of sort of, an avoidance of commitment, right?
Yes.
And it's funny when he wins the money at the bridge game, his aspirations for what he wants to do with it. He's going to buy a car and sort of repaint his apartment. It's not. There's nothing big and ambitious about. I suppose buying a Rolls Royce is pretty ambitious. But
he'd said in an earlier episode, in an earlier book, and we discussed it, that he only really ate well when he was on an assignment because he ate quite simply at home. But then in this, I think with this novel, there is a lot of car stuff on there. I know you're a car guy, David, so we'll get on to that. There's a lot of car stuff. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of luxury. Like we look around Blades. That's a whole world that I am not familiar with. So you touched on the fact that there's no international travel in this, which I miss as someone who rarely gets to travel. My holidays are in Rhyl in North Wales. I don't get to go to south of France. So that's my way to see the world. But that Blades, I couldn't get into Blades. So to see that luxury.
I'd sign you in, Shane. I wouldn't worry.
I haven't got the right trousers and stuff. You know what I mean?
you're going to need a tie, Shane. A tie and a blazer, Shane.
Couldn't afford to tip anybody.
You've got to be prepared to lose 250 quid a year.
Yes. No, what was interesting, I don't know whether it was through the membership rules or the explanation of the membership rules or whether it was mentioned, but I either read or deduced that his salary is actually £1,500 a year. Yeah.
It's described his salary.
It's it's not it's a good salary, but is it enough to risk your life for? But it just shows you, we ask a lot of our civil servants.
He's basically a mid-level civil servant. On a mid-level salary.
He's got a private. He's got some private income. But he
shares an office with 2 other men.
Yeah, and that was interesting actually. Finding out there's only 3 double O's. Yeah. There was 0012, I believe.
11.
8 and 11.
8 and 11, 008 and 00, and one of them had a hard time he was convalescing in Hong Kong, I believe. Is that right?
Berlin.
Berlin.
Right. Yeah, he just got out, which I presumably meant, in the new German Democratic Republic that they've set up.
Yeah, no, but it was really interesting, the background piece.
The other thing with that, David, that's interesting is there is a paragraph where it talks about it was the beginning of a typical routine day for Bond. It was only 2 or 3 times a year that an assignment came along. And you read these books and kind of think that every Monday there's a new adventure for him, a new mission, but there's only 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, so it's downtime and then these moments of extreme activity, extreme aggression, adrenaline pumping.
Yes, that was portrayed well. That was portrayed well. Yeah. And we met his secretary, of course, Layla Ponsonby.
Glad you pronounced that, because I have no idea how that's pronounced.
Yeah, that's right. She's a woman of reserved and unbroken beauty who has no intention of falling in for a man who may be dead in a week. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Yes. But that does curtail a love life, evidently, because according to the rules, they aren't allowed to fraternize with outsiders. So that must lead to some tensions at work, I would have thought. Yeah.
But there's also there's that observation that Bond makes. He says, unless she married soon, Bond thought for the 100th time or had a lover, her cool air of authority might easily become spinsterish, and she would join the army of women who had married a career.
Life's tough on the powder vine.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think generally James Bond has quite a lot of unresolved issues when it comes to women. He seems to veer between love and rage and everything in between.
Just sort of moving on slightly into the card game. because.
And before we get there, David, I just wanted to reference something that we're talking about Bond's work environment, and something that made me giggle was when he went to the officer's canteen. And he sat by himself and he ate grilled sole, a large mixed salad with his own dressing laced with mustard, some brie cheese and toast, and half a carafe of white Bordeaux. That's some lunch.
Well, I used to eat regularly in such a canteen, actually, so I can't say too much about it.
Yeah, I mean, let's not. Yeah, we'll get on to what he drinks that night in terms of the vodka, the champagne, then the Benzedrine.
Yes,
that's one hell of a way to play cards.
It certainly is. It certainly is.
Also, before they get to Blades, when they're talking about what's going to transpire, and M actually says to Bond, "You're the best card player in the service. You should be after the casino jobs you've been on." And I remembered we'd spent quite a lot of money putting you through a course in card shaping before you went after those Romanians in Monte Carlo before the war. So it's kind of setting up why Bond's going to be taken to Blades.
Yes.
A bit of background there, I thought.
Yes, but just for the benefit of listeners that perhaps haven't, nobody's read it yet. But when they get to read it in due course, part of this, of course, is the setup to the plot. And as we know, M calls Bond in and asks for his assistance because at his club, Blades, the aforementioned, there's an itinerant member who has been cheating at cards, who was also a massive name in industry and the political world at that junction, that point in history, because he's building a phenomenal new armament for the UK. And Bond, as we know, is asked to go and look at this card cheating from this itinerant member. And when he goes along to the club, as Simon was alluding to, we are given all of the details of membership and so on and so forth. And then the card game ensues, and we'll discuss that, no doubt. But I don't play cards, and I must say that when I read Casino Royale, although I enjoyed Casino Royale a lot, the card game for me probably wasn't exactly the highlight. But this time around, I really, despite the fact that I didn't have a clue what was going on, I thought the card game was fantastic. And when I thought to myself, why is it that you're excited by something that you just don't understand? It occurred to me that it was because of the dialogue that was going on all around this card game. And I thought that the card game was really very, very thrilling. And I don't know what you guys thought about that.
So I was outside my club and I ran into a newspaper man called Tim Shipman. Covered the Critchell Down affair when the minister Dugdale had to resign back in '54.
Was he when you met him?
Said, yeah, so I met him. I talked to a newspaper man, and he
the
said
Dirty
that this was
Macintosh Brigade.
Yeah, he said that this was his favorite bit of a Bond novel of the three novels to date, and clearly had, as far as I could tell, had practiced the Shiner. The move that is made in which reflective surface is used in order for the dealer to see what cards he's giving out. Now, so I thought that was quite interesting. But I think to follow on from your point, it's partly to do with the way that he describes things. So when Fleming likes something, he describes in loving detail, but he does it in simple, clear English, and that's something that'd be good to talk a bit more about at some point further down the line. But it's the simplicity of the writing coupled with that kind of loving detail, which I think seems to inspire people a great deal.
That's true. That is definitely true. Yeah. No, and I think the whole setup, the way that he introduced us as readers to club life through that episode was really quite intoxicating. And of course, the card game takes place, as we all know. he discovers that Hugo Drax, who we are now introduced to, the villain of the piece, who is really incredibly well described with his red hair, his avant-garde facial hair, and so on and so forth. He's quite a beast, this man. He's extremely bombastic as well, and extremely rich to boot. And we're given the backstory that during the war he was involved in this terrific explosion, this accident, and so on and so forth.
In the Ardennes, right? Wasn't it Battle of the Bulge?
Yes,
yeah.
And we sort of given his background, and he, I mean, you immediately you don't like the guy. I mean, this is
Really? Because I thought he should be made prime minister.
Well, certainly, I mean, Bond is quite admiring of him to begin with, and it's clear that the papers admire
his achievements, yes,
Drax, because, and his ambition, and this, and you get this sense that we're, well, as you know, we're in a period of uncertainty. It's just 9 years since the end of the war, since George Orwell described the Cold War. This, the fact that we live with this threat of annihilation by the atomic bomb, and we don't have the atomic bomb. We're not one of the big three anymore. The Russians and the Americans do, and we don't. And Drax, he seems to offer something. He offers Britain to regain its standing in the world, to become one of the big three.
Yeah,
and we'll come on to the rocket, but
No, I think Bond certainly admires him, and so does M to an extent. But I think they admire his achievements rather than his personal traits.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. But I mean, nonetheless, the sort of the findings of that night become quite sinister. How much, and as we know, Bond takes him down in this card game in a very sort of tense fashion, and I think he wins what, £15,000 at the end. He takes 15 grand off him. Was that the sort of figure?
Which is a lot of money.
It's a huge amount of money. I mean, that's a massive win. And of course, at the end, Drax.
Well, to put that into comparison, 15 grand, you can buy a Rolls Bentley convertible for 5 grand.
Yeah.
So he could buy 3 Rolls Bentleys with his winning.
Yeah. Well, he certainly, I think it. Well, as we know, he does actually manage to change his car in due course during this. Yeah. But absolutely.
I love the description, though. For me, it was, yes, I enjoyed the card game, particularly because I'd never played bridge before. I still don't really get it, but it was still an interesting read. But it was the whole description of Blades. There was that one comment, that observation, where they said there might be cheats or possible cheats amongst the clientele. Men who beat their wives, men with perverse instincts, greedy men, cowardly men, lying men. But the elegance of the room invested each one with a kind of aristocracy.
Yeah, it's a quite a powerful argument for a revolution, isn't it? Down, that's what I say.
This is why I think Fleming's such a good novelist, right? Is the way he describes places. It's that journalistic skill set of his, the powers of observation. He's not just saying we rocked up at this club and played bridge. It's the whole describing of the sea. And as you mentioned, Simon, the food they eat, the booze they drink is also, I mean, and let's not forget our friend Benzedrine.
Yes. He's not adverse to a little powder. But I think the both actually, with Bond, Fleming's hero, and with Fleming himself, you get the impression that they are both men on the outside looking in. I mean, it's why Fleming can describe this lifestyle in such detail, and the sort of people that inhabit that lifestyle in such detail, but then set himself apart from it because I don't think that that he comes off as being implicated completely in that world. He comes off as an observer rather than a participant, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
Yeah. No, but after the card game, obviously, we move into the meat and veg of the plot, as it were, because we discover that this rocket, which Hugo Drax is building down in Dover, that there is being an unsightly incident in a local pub where two of Drax's employees actually finish up dead. The first being murdered by the second protagonist, and superficially, this is a fallout over a woman called Gala Brand, who is the secretary of Hugo Drax. And so this hits the headlines, and there's only a couple of days to go before the test launch of this weapon, this new rocket. And so Bond is sent down to replace actually the guy that was shot, who was sort of head of security, and to work with Gala Brand and to find out what's going on. So off we go down to Dover via Maidstone and all of that good stuff. And when we get there, we find that somewhat embarrassed. Well, Bond's a little bit nervous about being reunited with Drax because of the card game. But
before that, I mean, it was interesting to me that you had the first meeting with M, which was very cordial in M's office because he wanted to go to Blades and catch up Drax. Then he gets called in the morning after, and it's back to formality. There's a mission on. The atmosphere has changed. And then the other thing that struck me...
Well, they're really hungover as well. He's really hungover. And they've just risked everything. I mean, they've literally just risked everything. If he'd lost, they would have lost everything. You know, both of them would have been wiped out.
Yeah.
So, he's a bit hungover.
Yes.
Because M said
he's good for the... Assistant Commission...
Yes.
Off to Scotland Yard, where he thinks he's in trouble.
Yeah.
And then, we discover that Gala Brand's an undercover special branch officer.
Yes.
And there's that line. There's that line from Drax. So when he takes the money off Drax, and this is the killer line for me in the book, when he says, "I should spend the money quickly, Commander Bond."
Yes.
You know, and you're like, "Oh, this is going to get a bit naughty."
Yes.
And then we get, and the other thing I thought about was, you know, when M's like, "You got to go down to Kent and you've got to be the security officer," or that fellow Drax is there. It's kind of like, would Drax really have permitted that? You know, he said, "No, send me someone else. You can't just have Bond. He's just taking 15 grand off me." Or was Drax like, "Yeah, okay, I'll get him.
Yeah.
You know?
I think so. So. And you get this. So this is another interesting thing that we see in Fleming is that I think what we see here is the concept of the base. You know, the idea of a base, a villain's lair.
A villain's lair,
full
absolutely.
Of uniformed technicians and soldiers, guarded, and then henchmen. So I think we have something that is kind of new to the genre, I think, and I expect more of.
That is, yes, I think you're right, Simon. I think it is definitely new to the genre. I mean, I can't think of anything from Dennis Wheatley quite like that. Of course, a lot of Wheatley's stuff is about the Gestapo, but yes, I think that is the first time we see that, and it's very well done. And these guys are very sinister, running around in white uniforms with this amazing facial hair again, and completely cropped heads.
Yeah.
They're a real sinister gang, you know. You wouldn't like to bump into them, any of them, on a dark night. But just backing up on the sort of special branch thing, this is the first time we really come across special branch actually in in a Bond book, and Bond meets a new friend. I'm struggling to remember his name.
Valance.
Yes, Valance. Yeah. I'm wondering if he's going to be in future books. Maybe, I don't know. But of course,
felt very dispirited having any involvement with Special Branch. I mean, clearly they're way down the pecking order, and Fleming describes that scene with Bond sat in the waiting room at Special Branch.
Yes.
He said, only criminals or informers came and waited here, or influential people trying to get out of a dangerous driving charge, or desperately hoping to persuade Valance that their sons were not really homosexuals.
Yes.
It's very seedy.
Yes. And he still found time to sort of smoke 10 cigarettes while he was waiting, and put them out in the top of a player's tin, so that's interesting. But of course, it's an unusual mission because the Secret Service, MI6, as it were, isn't supposed to work within the UK. So this is all sort of special stuff, if you like.
Yeah, he has to get special permission from the Prime Minister.
Yes, and he finishes up being friendly with the new guy at in Special Branch. So interesting to see.
And I think we see, this is another one talking about things that were beginning to come into light in terms of the way that Fleming writes. This concept of the Bond girl, which I've heard a chap said to me in my club. We've had Vesper, Solitaire, now Gala, which is short for Galatea, the destroyer that her father, who was a naval man, commanded. She's an interesting one, though. I mean, she's a strong character. She's a special branch officer. She doesn't fall for Bond lightly, that's for sure.
But she likes.
We are given her vital statistics, though, in advance of the mission.
We are.
We're told about her distinguishing marks, etc. As to where they're to be found.
And also, she finds that men in blue underpants are reassuring. There was that line on the beach where they went for a swim, and she looked up and she actually said he looked lithe and brown. The blue pants were reassuring. So there we go.
What, reassuring that they were on? Yes.
No, there may be a run on blue pants after this episode.
But his usual moves don't really work on her, and he gets very frustrated. He says he felt a strong urge to give her a sharp kick on the ankle.
Yes, that's the way to do it.
He definitely bests him.
I'm sure that would be a winning move. Yeah. No, he doesn't have a lot of luck with women. I mean, I wonder if one day, if they ever bring, Bond to the screen, maybe they'll reinvent him as some Lothario who can, have multiple partners and so on and so forth. But so far, if you think about it, in Casino Royale, he succeeded in starting an affair with an enemy agent, which is not a great career move. I mean, in Live and Let Die, he couldn't consummate the act on the train because he had a broken finger, which I think is a bizarre excuse for, lack of performance, if you want to put it that way. And then now we have this situation where he's struggling to gain her attention. Yeah. So maybe there's more training required for Mr. Bond in this particular.
I think he's basically a rather a lonely figure. So I had a chat with Jeremy Duns, who's a chap who lives over in the Eastern Baltic somewhere, suspiciously close to the Soviet Union. And he basically said, actually that he falls in love. I mean, Bond is not a man, he's not callous. I mean, he's described as cold repeatedly, but he does fall in love with each of them, and ultimately it doesn't work. It fails. And in Gala's case, she actually, she turns him down. She walks away. She's engaged.
You can never.
And he's left actually quite forlorn. There's that line where he says, "The pain of failure that is so much greater than the pleasure of success." And actually, I think by the end of this novel, he's rather a lonely figure.
I can never see Fleming marrying him off, though, in any future novel. I can't see that happening. I can't see him finding
that'll never happen.
If he does, she won't last. If he does, she won't last. She'll die a terrible death. I think there's a bit of Fleming's got history when it comes to that, hasn't he? I
think Lady Anne's a difficult lady to live with, I think. Anyway, going back to the lair, going back to the villain's lair. I think
Can we go back to Gala just before we finish with it? Simon was saying that she's not the usual Bond girl, and there is that one line in it which is not the usual Fleming. She actually says to Bond right at the end, she says, "You don't trust me to have any ideas. You just tell me what you think we've got to do." And that's almost quite feminist. You know, she's telling him, "Look, I know how to get us out of this, and you're not asking me."
Well, and she plays a key role. She's the one that spots that the trajectory of the rocket is not into safety, but is actually heading back towards London, and that annihilation is coming.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, a critical part of her character, I think, there. And also when people say that Fleming is a misogynist, I mean, I have some sympathy with that, but then you can go back to this character and say, well, actually go read Gala Brown.
No, I don't think young Ian's a misogynist, you know. I think he's just a good author. Anyway, independent of that, one of the things, going back to this lair business, what did we think about the description of the weapon, the rocket? Because I thought that was phenomenally well done.
Oh, absolutely. So somebody said to me, the real Bond girl in this book is the rocket. And let me just read you the description of it, which is just great. Yeah. The shimmering projectile rested on a blunt cone of latticed steel, which rose from the floor between the tips of 3 severely backswept delta fins that looked as sharp as surgeons' scalpels, but otherwise nothing marred the silken sheen of the 50 feet of polished chrome steel, except the spidery fingers of 2 light gantries which stood out from the walls and clasped the waist of the rocket between thick pads of foam rubber.
It's an amazing description. That's an amazing description.
Yeah. And I think that's where he gets quite flowery. But for me as a writer, what's interesting stylistically actually is the simplicity of the language. You know, it's basically Anglo-Saxon English without flourish. It's kind of thick with consonants. So you get things like, you know, when the chalk collapses, he refers to zigzag cracks snaking down its face, or when the Bentley crashes, the hot metal ticked and crackled softly and steam was fountaining from the shattered radiator. Yeah. So you just get these hard sounds, you know, relatively short sentences, you know, thick with consonants, and I think that creates something very powerful and propulsive.
Yes. No, you're right. It does. It really does. One of the things I liked about the rocket as well is the way that it's sort of grounded in the sort of V2 rocket, which we're all familiar with. So, I found it entirely plausible, the development of this rocket, that was really rather gripping, because it could have all been quite fanciful. You know, but it wasn't.
Sorry, Shane.
Go for it.
Well, that chap Duns told me that Fleming had got, you know, who's also a newspaper man, had got one of his journalists in Germany, and Fleming spoke German, got hold of an early copy of Werner von Braun's book. Werner von Braun was the father of the V2 rocket program, who then, you know, goes on, is now in America working on the Saturn program, Saturn space program, and that actually, you know, this is part of Fleming's skill. You know, he wants to get the gen, so he gets this early German copy of this book all about rocketry and telemetry, and he works it into this novel. And I think that's part of, you know, being a thriller writer, is getting the gen, you know, getting something that other people haven't seen, and then describing it in this loving detail. So I thought that was interesting.
There's the line that the terrible beauty of the greatest weapon on earth. He also, as I understand it, wrote to Arthur C. Clarke and the British Interplanetary Society to check out accuracies and ranges of missiles. So all this was going on in the background. Even though this is a work of fiction, clearly he's put a lot of thought into actually creating something that's realistic and not a space age kind of UFO thing.
Yes, and it's a first for him, actually, because, I mean, with Casino Royale, there was no need to sort of go that route, if you like. It was a sort of different type of story.
I was kind of relieved, David. You know, the title of the book is Moonraker, and I'm like, oh, he's not going to put man on the moon, is he? I mean, then it just goes into a whole different level.
Well, given what they've done for Casino Royale, if the Americans ever get to make a movie out of it, they'll probably be stupid enough to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad that it was realistic.
Yeah. Apparently, it's named after the top sail on a ship, the top rectangular sail on a ship.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Well, I read that somewhere.
Ah.
You know,
okay.
But, who knows if it's true?
Yeah.
It's also interesting. You mentioned Von Braun. Of course, you know he went to work for the Americans, and all of these Germans working in the UK for Drax. Clearly, he's done the same thing there. He's gone and got these scientists and brought them over to work for him, i.e., for us to give us this missile. So that's at play as well.
Something else that repeats itself in this one is the henchman. This seems to be a reoccurring theme. We have a new henchman in this
Krebs.
Krebs, yeah, who is really a despicable. This guy is really sleazy. I mean, he doesn't open doors; he slips right under them. You know, he's a real sort of disgusting piece of work, and that really adds a sort of added darkness to the fact that, and it at one point, I thought that the novel took on a little bit of Agatha Christie to it, because it was virtually a sort of closed house mystery where they were all, you know, in this lair. And it became more of a detective story with Bond trying to figure out what was going on and so on and so forth. And I thought that was a sort of a new dimension to what we've seen thus far, and that was very, very good.
Also,
and we get this idea of illegals, right? I mean,
yes.
We see, you know, what becomes the Soviets use illegals, that's undercover agents, and of course it turns out that these mustachioed technicians are all former Nazis, and Drax himself is not what he seems.
Well, it's interesting the sort of facial hair business, because at one point, sort of Bond's quite intrigued by all of this facial hair, and he said, "Well, why is it that you've allowed them to do these very artistic beards and so on and so forth?" And Hugo Drax explains it by saying that, well, it's so he can tell them apart, because, you know, when they have their white uniforms on, it's very difficult. So Bond said, well, couldn't you just put numbers on them? You know, was interesting. But
although Krebs, going back to Krebs, he was odious, but a bit of a weakling. I mean, Bond gives him a good kick in when he finds him in his room.
Well,
he wasn't someone that was, you know, at Bond.
No, he's like I think he's a proto henchman. I think we'll see. I think we'll see more henchmen in future.
Yeah,
Fleming,
a prototype.
If he keeps this up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, I like his background. You know, he's a werewolf. He's a ex-Hitler youth operating behind enemy lines. I mean, it's a rich history.
Yes.
There were quite a few brands mentioned in this one.
Oh yes. Well, we got some new mentions that I picked up on. Is you have Floris, the fragrance company, who provide everything for the restrooms in the club. You've got sort of ongoing descriptions about Bond's dress code, but I do think actually that Fleming may be confusing serge with wool. you know, and I think that when he talks about a serge suit, you know, I mean,
Yes.
serge is very much a sort of military material, is it not? You know, I wouldn't like to be walking around in a serge suit. And I think Fleming's a little confused there. But I have to say, and it's telling tales out of school, I know, Fleming has got a fairly torrid relationship with his own tailor. He's seen as decidedly mean, and he keeps bringing in these old suits that he expects to get them repaired for nothing. So I think that he's sort of having that that dress code inflicted on Bond. And there's one particularly horrendous outfit that Bond changes into at one juncture. It was described as an old bird's eye patterned suit with a dark blue Sea Island cotton shirt and a dark blue knitted tie. I think if you went out in that lot, you know, nobody buy a used car off you, you know. Yeah. So there are some difficulties here in the wardrobe department, I find, but you know, maybe that's just...
Yeah, you wouldn't get into whites wearing that, would you?
I don't think so. I think you'd be rejected on the door, you know.
I've had a whiff of Florist. It smells very feminine to me as a scent. I wouldn't get away with wearing that in Swansea.
I think you bought the wrong one, Shane. You know, Winston Churchill used to have used to use Florist. I think you were at the wrong end of the counter. Yeah. No, but there are brands that go. I mean, we've got the cigarettes, of course, are described in great detail. And in actual fact, when Gala Brand is thinking about Bond and describing Bond in her own mind, she pretty much decimates him for all of this stuff. You know, she describes him as you know, a posh, well, not posh. She describes him as, you know, a typical a secret agent that plies his trade by seducing women, and you know, with his cigarette case, his fancy cigarette case, his fancy lighter, his cigarettes with 3 gold bands, and so on and so forth. She actually gives us quite a rundown on the visual aspect of Bond. But yes,
but he manages to turn that around when they go for the walk, you know, and he starts. And there's another interesting thing I think about Fleming is that he gets quite excited when he starts describing nature, be it flowers or gulls, or you know, when the descriptions from Jamaica, you know, that actually nature seems to be something that Fleming gives the sort of same loving detail that he's given to the card game and the missile, and in that interaction between Gala and Bond, there's a softening there. And then of course he saves her life by rolling on top of her as the cliff face, you know, collapse, you know, those zigzag cracks, and then collapses on it. And there's an incredible intimacy to that scene where he's digging her out of the chalk, and they've been stripped of all their clothes, and they're you know, they're almost crushed, completely covered in chalk, and then they walk to the pub, which is, I think, amusingly called The World Without Want.
Yes.
So he does. I think he disarms her in during those events.
Yes.
And then the other thing that struck me, I think, which subsequent, it's just the sheer physicality of what happens to them both, frankly. You know, when they're in the vents and they get scalded with steam, and when the rocket takes off and they're in the shower in the office, and they're you know, again, they're just get you know, almost burned, you know, scalded again. And previous to that, when Bond crashes the Bentley, you know, it's quite, he goes through a lot of punishment. They both do, and it's very physically described.
It reminded me of the end of Live and Let Die. You know, when he's kind of braced for death, he's going to get dragged through the sea with Solitaire. And it's the same here. He's more or less saying, look, I'll try and save you. I'll put you in the shower, but, you know, this isn't going to end well. And you do feel like, it's like, okay, how on earth are they going to get out of this? Lots of tension.
Yeah, we very nearly see London destroyed.
Yes.
We're on the point of the annihilation of London. And there's a great, I think there's a great signpost to that much earlier in the book, and that's when Bond is driving through London, and there's a sign up, a road sign up, an advert that says "Summer Shell is here," but because it's partially obscured by trees, it looks as if it says "Hell is here."
I love that.
And, you know, and it's a beautiful bit of symbolism.
Yeah,
and it hints at, you know, actually, if the atom bomb that's fitted on the rocket had actually, you know, detonated above London, then it really would have been hell.
I loved that passage. Yeah, where the neon lights gave the message of hell is here. Yeah, I thought
that ties in with the original title for the book was going to be Mondays Are Hell.
Yeah, but I'm pleased.
So that would tie in with it. I mean,
I'm pleased it's Moonraker. Yeah.
And but there's also that line.
Well, the Americans may call it something bizarre.
If it wasn't for the stuffy chairman of Blades who detected a guy cheating at cards, if it wasn't for M who agreed to help an old friend, then there would have been disaster. And the whole book kind of rests on that.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things I liked as well, actually, was the unveiling of Drax. You know, when Drax tells Bond that, you know, he was never a British soldier at all, and he's never suffered from amnesia. You know, that his real name is Graf Hugo van der Drax, and that he was a German commander of the werewolf commando unit. And all of that stuff. I thought that was incredibly well done. You know, it was a great way for the villain to come out of the cupboard, as it were, and to, you know, to say that the Nazi Empire was back and was going to seek out their revenge. You know, with this Soviet-supplied nuclear warhead. It was incredibly well done, and I thought that the parts that, you know, when Bond and Gala are imprisoned, you know, and they're going to be taken out by the blast from the Moonraker launch. It was really, really tense. I enjoyed that a lot.
I also liked that part of his story, the irony that it was his team of commandos who put the bombs at the medical quarters of the Allies camp in the Ardennes, and then he gets taken out by one of his own German aircraft and gets taken to that hospital, and that's why he becomes disfigured. And brilliant, you know, brilliant.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. But I understand that Ian is a little upset with Cape at the moment because he's been making some inquiries about publishing numbers, and Hammond Ince is selling 40,000 in hardback. And Ian's in a bit of a hissy fit about this, and he's going to put some pressure on Cape to up the ante. And I think they should, because this is it's really by far and away. I mean, we're only in March, but it's by far and away the best thing that I've read this year.
How does it stack up to the other two, David?
Interesting question, actually. I think it's best. I think it's the best one so far. Once I got over the fact that I wasn't going to go anywhere exciting on my reading holiday, and I sort of got into it, I thought it was by far and away the best one. And I thought it was flawless as a sort of reading experience. And when I discovered, as we said at the outset, that it was originally going to be a film script, and then he turned it into a novel by putting the guard game on it, I wouldn't have detected any of that. I thought that it was, and why would I? Because he's written a perfectly, fantastic novel. And I think it's the best one so far. Yeah, I really do.
Simon?
I have to say, I thought Casino Royale was like the opening chapter of a book. It was barely a novella, and it seemed, I wasn't convinced by the premise really. And
there were a few holes in it.
And actually, there were definitely a few holes in it. And now I think Fleming's getting into his stride, and and again, this is quite a short book, but it is a full book, and the shortness is partly is a reflection of the style that I've been talking about, which is one of the things that makes it quite powerful. But yeah, no, I definitely, the more I've thought about it, the more I've enjoyed it. So I'm definitely warming to Fleming, I would say.
Yes.
And I'd say that this is the best one yet. So yeah, I look forward to whatever he dashes off in 2 months next year.
I enjoyed this.
Are we expecting another one?
Well, yes, legend has it. Evidently, he's over in Jamaica as we speak, or in actual fact, rumor is that he's just back from Jamaica as we speak with another one.
So he's maybe got something.
So it's he's definitely committed to the project. That there's no doubt about it. And I think it's interesting in context of other things that I've sort of been reading, because I mean, I'm a big fan of Eric Ambler, but for me, Fleming is something different. It's more sleek than Ambler in a certain way. It's more modern. It's hard boiled, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, he's definitely influenced by Dash Hammett. I mean, you can see that in there. This is clean, clear prose, hard boiled, violent, and powerful. Yeah, and I think actually the size of the book, not that size, is everything, as it were, but I think that it's a good that these books are the right sort of length for a really tense, fast read and so on and so forth. And I know, I mean, if I take Dennis Wheatley, for example, and I like some of his stuff, but he does go on a bit, and the books are, some of them are quite...
There was no flab on this one. I mean,
no, these are very finely honed. I think that's probably the expression I'm looking for. They're very finely honed. I mean, Rumac, he just sits at his typewriter and Goldeneye and bangs the thing out,
This is one I could see myself rereading several times and not getting bored of it. To me, also, I like that Bond, seemed more human. I mean, he needs Benzedrine to get through the night. He's not superhuman. He doesn't get the girl at the end, which was a big shock. You think they're going to, sail off into the sunset, and he doesn't get the girl.
Yeah, I can't believe that final line. Yeah, that final line is they turned away from each other and walked off into their different lives. I mean, it's really sad.
Yeah.
What did they call the guy that she's going to marry?
Some mid-level beer. Or is he a cop, or is he? What is he?
I'm trying to think actually, but he's got a quite a. If I'd been let down for him, I'd be very upset with myself. His name is.
He's probably reliable.
Yes, I think so. But anyway, Bond went and planned all of this luxurious trip in France with her. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the build up to that. It's not like he's just turning up, to take her into bed. He's planning out a whole vacation for them.
No, he got himself a new car to take her in, Yeah. 1953 Mark 6 Bentley. Very nice indeed. I wish I could have one of those. And
we haven't had time to go into it on this episode, but there's a lot of car talk in this one as well.
There is actually, because it's obvious that Fleming's very interested in motor racing, and when he's talking about Drax's car, he gives all of the background of the Mercedes wins and so on and so forth. And he certainly knows his stuff,
I was, before we just wrap up, I was talking to a reviewer at The Spectator who also enjoyed it, and he said it's all utterly disgraceful and highly enjoyable. I thought it was a great description.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's also just finally, it's not an authorized op. I mean, this is an unofficial operation. There's nothing about this that is a formal secret intelligence service op. This is just helping our friend in a club.
Yeah.
And suddenly we get the capital city is saved from annihilation.
Well, these things happen.
Excellent. Simon, thanks a million for joining us from your secret location today.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure to see you both, and I'll catch up with you, David, at the club, and we'll lay a tie at reception for you, Shane.
Thank you. I'll need it.
Absolutely.
I'll be able to smell David with his dab of Floris on,
Floris, yeah.
I'll get it from the right end of the counter, though, Shane. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you need it with all those Morlands you smoke,
Okay. All the best.
Thanks,
Cheers,
gentlemen.